So this is also the 101st anniversary of the beginning of the First World War. And, you know, of course, here in Seattle and all over the country, there were massive marches against the war. And much of the labor movement was opposed to it, calling it a boss's war. And we voted here for a guy who ran for president on a platform of non-intervention in Europe, and then got the U.S. involved with the war in Europe. And in Australia, it was an interesting case. They had 2 referendums against participating in the war, of popular referendums where like all the citizens voted. Like I think they were doing that before most other countries. And in both of them, the majority of the voters voted against participating in the war, and then Australia joined the war. In Canada, 50% of draft-age men got medical exemptions, indicating a potential lack of enthusiasm. I mean, a lot of them, I'm sure, had real reasons, like black lung, because they were working in the mines and stuff, but most of them were farm boys, and they probably would have been okay. There's a campaign in Europe, mainly to remember the war differently from how most of the media is remembering it, and the campaign is titled after the most well-known slogan from the Irish anti-war movement of the time, called quote of James Connolly. He said, "We fight for neither king nor Kaiser, but Ireland."
Today the arms race was at an end. If there was a soul alive who could begin to comprehend the suffering to follow, the hell that would transpire when the soldiers were lined up and the men began to fire. 100 years ago today, all around the world, there were hordes of marching men with flags of empire unfurled. Then there was the opposition who wouldn't stay on bended knee, who said, "We'll fight for neither king nor Kaiser, neither God nor country." 100 years ago today, streets were filled to burst with millions of people who said they had no thirst for the blood of other workers who lived across the sea. They said, "We'll fight for neither king nor Kaiser, neither God nor country." Ago today, referendums were ignored. Democracy was something no empire could afford. Sedition laws were passed and they filled the penitentiaries. We'll fight for neither king nor Kaiser, neither God nor country. 100 years ago today, the executions were at dawn. Bomb blasts filled the air, the battle lines were drawn. The money fields were all red, a voice echoed amid the bodies. We'll fight for neither king nor Kaiser, neither God nor country. We'll fight for neither king nor Kaiser, neither God nor country.
So then, 200 years ago, the U.S. was at war again, and this time it was what they, I guess now it was 201 years ago. They called it the War of 1812, although most of it was fought in 1814, and it was basically, it's been completely pretty much written out of the history books, but what it was an unprovoked invasion of Canada by the United States, which did not go well for the invading. Didn't go very well for those who were being invaded either, but there was one especially notable event that took place in the month of August 1814 that I thought was worth commemorating in song. I believe it was August 24th, 1814.
Robert Ross was from Ross Trevor. He was born in County Down. His family was given land there by the British Crown. He was a man born to the gentry, born with wealth and fame, but he joined the British Army to serve his queen and make his name. In the Napoleonic Wars, he fought in many lands, in Holland and in Spain and the far-off Egyptian sands. He was wounded there in battle, came back to fight another day, and he was sent off to attack the USA. York had been sacked and burned by invading Yankee men, but the Canadians regrouped, chased the Yankees home, and then the British Navy made its way to the shores of D.C. town, where General Ross burned the White House down. The year was 1814. The U.S. was in retreat. It was a Canadian victory, an American defeat. Without the French to help them, they got their ass whipped by the Crown when General Ross burned the White House down. The place had just been constructed only 12 years before, but it had to be rebuilt soon after this disastrous war. The president turned tail and ran like a raggedy clown when General Ross burned the White House down. He was killed a few months later. Irish rebels stopped him in his tracks. He was buried in Nova Scotia, in the town of Halifax. He might have been forgotten, but he'll forever be renowned. He's the man who burned the White House down. He's the man who burned the White House down. What's that? Do what again? Oh, can we do it again? Can we do it again? Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, the drone was clearly lacking whatever components might have been necessary. Yeah. Ah, well. Let's see here. I take requests, too. If I wrote it, there's at least a possibility that I'll know it. Oh, okay.
David, you just read a song called The Invisible Man.
Oh, yeah.
The one-night count for all the homeless.
Oh, fantastic. One.
And the numbers are up, so maybe you want to sing.
Oh, good idea. Yeah. Good idea. If I can remember it. That's one of the ones. San Patricio song. Oh, I got one for your new city councilor. You know, the famous one. I tried to make it easily sing-alongable. As I was being arrested, a reporter stuck a mic in my face. I said the first few words that came to mind: if there's hope for the human. Let's see. How does it go? Okay, there we go. As I was being arrested, a reporter stuck a mic in my face. I said the first few words that came to mind: if there's hope for the human race, then we need $15 an hour. $15 an hour. $15 an hour. 15. They say this is a democracy, but there's none of that on the job. Just a company making billions while the rest of us get robbed. We need $15 an hour. $15 an hour. $15 an hour. 15. There's so much crime in the city, it fills my heart with rage. Especially the crime of the billionaires who would pay such a criminal wage. We need $15 an hour. $15 an hour. $15 an hour. 15. I took a red-eye to California, landed at LAX. Well-paid workers looked me in the eye, said it's really not complex. blues. We need $15 an hour, $15 an hour, $15 an hour, 15. The company says the union just wants to get your dues. They should try making that argument with someone who has something to lose. We need $15 an hour, $15 an hour, $15 an hour, 15. I'll do a song for the San Patricio, somebody mentioned. And whenever I would do this song, and I often used to say, this is what was it? When I would do songs about Palestine, Palestinian friend Rafif Ziada would, if she was in the audience, she'd talk about, she'd say, which occupation? I said, here's a song about the occupied territory. She'd say, which occupied territories? You're in Canada. This is about the occupied territory known as the Great Southwest, which used to be the Great Northeast. My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go, enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. Marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin go bragh, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad para la República. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were reaping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side, we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side.
Oh, bullies! You got it. You got it. Coming up. I got a whole request list. Okay. Oh gosh. See, I was trying to do that. But okay, we got at least songs on the right topic. Yeah. Okay, we got a cue now, as they would say in England. Oh, I have, sometimes they say if you have a new album, it's good to do songs from the album. So I'll do another from my latest album. Is called Falasteen Habibti, and it's a collection of all the songs I've written about Palestine over the past 15 years. And this is the one that they used to play on the BBC a lot, that got a guy called to testify in front of the BBC Board of Governors about his journalistic neutrality after he had been working there for 30 years with a very popular weekly folk music show. They said he was not a neutral journalist because he told me to keep up the good work. Child, what will you remember when you recall your 16th year? The horrid sound of helicopter gunships, the rumble of the tanks as they drew near, as the world went about its business, and I burned another tank of gasoline. The Dow Jones lost a couple points that day while you were crying in the city of Jenin. Did they even give your parents warning before they blew the windows out with shells? While you hid inside the high school basement amidst the ringing of church bells, as you watched your teacher crumple by the doorway, and in England they were toasting to the Queen. You were so far from the thoughts of so many, huddled in the city of Jenin. Were you thinking of the taunting of the soldiers, or of the shit they smeared upon the walls? Were you thinking of your cousin after torture, or Tel Aviv and its glittering shopping malls? When the fat men in their mansions say that you don't want peace, did you wonder what they mean? As you sat amidst the stench inside the darkness in the shattered city of Jenin. What went through your mind on that day at the sight of your mother's vacant eyes, as she lay still among the rubble beneath the blue Middle Eastern skies? As you stood upon this bulldozed building beside the settlements and their hills so green, as your tears gave way to grim determination
amidst the ruins of the city of Janine. And why should anybody wonder as you stepped on board the crowded bus across the green line, and you reached inside your jacket for the cord? Were you thinking of your neighbors' buried bodies as you made the stage for this scene? As you set off the explosives that were strapped around your waist? Were you thinking of the city of Janine?
There's this one woman in Boston named Debbie who used to come to all my shows. I haven't seen her in many years, but she used to come to all my shows. She'd pay to get in and everything just to wait until I sang that song so she could walk out, you know. But during, yeah, in a huff. There's always. So I would see her there in the audience, and I think, should I do that song in the second set or the first set? You know. But the first set seemed better because that way there was no chance of having to talk to her during intermission, you know.
I went to play at the playground to do things I like so much. Run with my friends, play make-believe, swing on the swings and such. But this morning I went to the playground and bullies were guarding the swings. They knocked over the slide, dumped out the sandbox, took away all of our things. This playground is run by bullies, and they're all so big and mean. But this playground was made for all of us, and we're gonna change this scene. Were scared of the bullies. They were so big and we were so small. Till somebody said if we organized, we could be 10 feet tall. We stood on each other's shoulders, put blankets over our heads. We looked like monsters and we roared like lions, and those bullies ran home and hid under their beds. This playground was run by bullies, and they're all so big and mean. But this playground was made for all of us, and we're gonna change this scene. Well, we got that playground back, but then we looked across the street, saw the sewage plant belching out smoke, poisoning the ground under our feet. It's giving us all asthma, and the hour is getting late. So we marched across the way, and we blocked that factory gate. 'Cause this world is run by bullies, and they're all so big and mean. But this world was made for all of us, and we're gonna change this scene. This world is run by bullies, and they're all so big and mean. But this world was made for all of us, and we're gonna change this scene.
And another request that we have the backlog. I say I'm not asking for one. I'm just saying we're going to get on to another one right now. This song is always true, even if it might, at sometimes it feels true and other times it doesn't. But it's always true that there's always this huge potential mass movement out there, and. But the powers that be are always doing everything they can to make sure we don't know that we have this potential, and that. But they constantly require the consent of the governed in order to govern, and the intelligent among the rulers are constantly afraid of losing that consent, and that's why they spend so much money on intelligence agencies to keep track of everybody and see what they're thinking and feeling, and infiltrating us to make sure we feel divided, and finding all the issues that are the most divisive issues within our given community at a given time and trying to exploit them. But all they have to do is fuck up for a little while, and then it's our turn. When I say the hungry should have food, I speak for many. When I say no one should have 7 homes, while some don't have any, I may find myself stranded in some strange place with naught but a vapid stare. I remember the world, and I know we are everywhere. When I say the time for the rich, it will come, let me count the ways, victories or hints of the future. Cairo, Tunis, Caracas, Buenos Aires. How many people are wanting and waiting and fighting for their share? They hide in their ivory towers, but we are everywhere. Religions and prisons and races, borders and nations, FBI agents and congressmen and corporate radio stations. They try to keep us apart, but we find each other, and the rulers are always aware that they are a tiny minority, while we are everywhere. With every bomb that they drop, every home they destroy, every land they invade, comes a new generation from under the rubble saying, we are not afraid. They will pretend we are few, but with each child that a billion mothers bear, comes the next demonstration that we are everywhere. We are everywhere. We are everywhere. Well, I think we call this country, sometimes they use the term democracy to talk about, the U.S., and which is a given. I mean, aside from the fact that 2 parties is only one more than one party, as Howard Zinn used to say, and of course they're both totally corporate-funded, corrupt institutions. But aside from that, there's no democracy in the workplace. So that's like where most of the population spends most of their waking lives, and they don't have freedom of speech or any of that stuff in the workplace. And you don't even have it in the airport, as I discovered, because I was wearing a somebody has one of those t-shirts. I was wearing George Bush's an international terrorist t-shirt. I had 5 of them, and I would wear them, all the time, basically, for many years. And I was in the airport in D.C. and discovered that I wasn't allowed to board the flight unless I changed my shirt. And I insisted that I had freedom of speech. I was sure of that, because I knew about the Bill of Rights and stuff. And then they relented, actually, and put me on a later flight. Because the thing was that there was a woman complaining apparently about my t-shirt who thought, if you're going to be a terrorist, you're probably not going to wear a shirt that says international terrorist on it, right? So she probably had less to worry about me than anybody else. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt. Of course I'm not going to hijack the fucking plane. But But then they put me on another flight 2 hours later and gave me a free ticket to anywhere in the country for my trouble. So, that worked out well. But actually, then I consulted a lawyer that I know, and he said, actually, under the law, you do not have the right to wear that T-shirt in the airport. If they want you to change it, they don't have to let you on the plane. It is their right to tell you to change your T-shirt, not yours to wear the one you want. And of course, they also say that the country is this is a capitalist country, and I question that whole concept too, because it seems basically like feudalism to me for the most part. When you consider that it's like mostly banks and land, big property owners that own the whole country, and then other people theoretically own their houses, and actually they're just paying it off their whole lives, mortgages, and then most of us are renting, and we're just completely at the mercy of massive property holders. We have no rights whatsoever, democratic rights or any of that kind of economic rights, none of that stuff, to control our lives. I mean, some places they do a little bit, San Francisco, they can't raise the rent more than 1% a year, but they get around it by moving their relatives in for 6 months, and then they can raise the rent to whatever they want. So my rent in Portland has gone up by about 80% in the past 7 years. I've moved out of 3 cities because I couldn't pay the rent. Folks like me weren't welcome, so I picked it up and went. It's always the same story. I find a place I wanted to be, and soon enough I'm joined by all the other refugees. Then watch the website's warble. This is the hippest place to hang. Hey, check out Division. It's the sweetest thing since Tang. Then watch the millionaires come in, build a luxury hotel, sipping coffee on the sidewalk, saying, isn't this place swell? Rents are going up and the neighborhood's going down. In gentrification town, see the families leave the city. Watch how they accept their fate, except the ones who had the timing right and bought some real estate. The ones who had the timing and the ones who had the credit. The ones who paid attention to whoever it was who said it. This is a nation that won't suffer utopians or fools. He who has the gold rules. He who has the gold, he who bought the stock, he who is the landlord who owns your block. Rents are going up and the neighborhood's going down. Here in gentrification town. They say you can't blame the yuppies, they're just responding to the will of the market and the strength of the US dollar bill. But the dollar's only strong if you had some to your name. Otherwise you're on the business end of the game. The end that just stays home cause they can't afford the show. The end that has to pack their things and find a place to go. The new hit place to be for a little while, then the wrecking balls move in and chase us out again. The rents are going up and the neighborhood's going down. Here in gentrification town, rents are going up and the neighborhood's going down. Here in gentrification town, gentrification town. And then there was the way the country started. I think this is so interesting to me because, the reason why the reason why wealthy countries in the world today are wealthy, it's a combination of things. It's exploitation of other countries is a big part of the wealth. But just as important, or even more important, is the class war fought within each of these countries. For example, Spain is not a wealthy country, despite the fact that they exploited colonies for centuries and killed millions of people as a result of this exploitation. The average miner in the Spanish mines in South America lived about a year. 50% of the miners died every year in some of those Spanish mines in South America. So there was no shortage of exploitation of people, you know. But the Spaniards never mastered capitalism, you know. So they just sent all the money to England, you know, and the class war wasn't fought in Spain as a result because they didn't industrialize the way other countries did. And you know, it's complicated, and I don't pretend to understand the whole thing. But what I do understand is that this country was a feudal country when it started. It was very much based on feudal principles of organization, and the wealthy elite from Holland and England were given this country. Everybody else was not given anything, you know. Everybody else who were not part of that tiny, tiny elite of wealthy landed gentry from Holland and England, you know, they didn't get shit. And the reason why we have, you know, what we call middle class today, or what was originally, you know, small farmers, people that owned a little bit of land. This whole concept, this is a recent concept, you know. Little people didn't own land, you know, just the wealthy did. Everybody else was peasants, you know, that was America, you know, just like Europe. It was a nation of peasants, except we never called them peasants because Americans can't be peasants by definition. So we called them tenant farmers, and later in the South they called them sharecroppers, and now we call them farm workers and all sorts of other things. You can never call them peasants, you know. You can be homeless, but you can't be a peasant. Not in America. But we were a nation of peasants, and what the thing that changed that to a large extent was the Homestead Act of 1862, which said white people can get land. And of course, most of the population was white, so that was beneficial to a lot of people. It was very much not beneficial to a lot of other people. But basically, white people, you go move out to the West, and we'll give you a little bit of land. You know, you might have to, you know, fight the indigenous people that we just stole it from. But in any case, you know, you can get some free land here. And and that whole thing of giving away the land was, you know, we now look at it as some kind of an inevitability. Like, of course, they wanted to give some people, maybe even most people, or give the white people, or whatever it was. They wanted to give them land, you know. But that wasn't just, it wasn't like people were thinking so intelligently about it, like, oh, let's have an egalitarian society, you know, let's not have feudalism. Let's keep the feudalism in New York, but out West we'll have something more egalitarian. That was never, you know, it was, they passed the Homestead Act because they were afraid that they'd lose control of the country because the peasants were revolting. And we don't know about that. We don't learn about the peasants revolting, you know. But not only were the peasants revolting in Europe and burning down the castles and overthrowing every monarchy in Europe in the space of a few months in 1848, except for England and Russia, every other monarchy was overthrown by peasant rebellions. That's way before the internet swept from country to country, people speaking different languages. It didn't matter. They all rebelled. And after that, the peasants got land and rights. And the same thing happened here. And it was called the Rent Strike Wars in upstate New York. Same time period.
Patroons came from Holland to America, became landlords where none had been before. Soon one man owned 500,000 acres on both sides of the Hudson River shore. He invited families to move in and give him 30% of everything they grew every year. This is how they pay the rent. His name was Van Rensselaer. He became one of the richest men on earth. In today's terms, $90 billion is how much he'd be worth. All this for doing nothing but saying all of this was his. I have the power of the state behind me, and I'm in the landlord biz. After 200 years of this and one revolution won, another Van Rensselaer had another son, and this Rensselaer Rensselaer was greedier than his ancestors dead and past. It was the 1840s and things were changing fast. It was the straw that broke the back. The bottle was uncorked. They started organizing meetings, the tenant farmers of New York. They found the strength of numbers. They found the power of suggestion. They found each other asking the same question. Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? They vowed they would stop the rent collection. They vowed they'd bring this madness to an end. And when one blew the tin horn of distress, he soon found he had 1,000 friends with calico skirts, masks upon their faces, on horseback, armed with knives and guns. They chanted and they yelled and they kept their farms and they kept the sheriffs on the run. They asked, who gave you the right to be a landlord? Live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Governors malicious tried to stop them, but nothing could be done to break their will. And by 1848 the landlords buckled, sold their holdings to the farmers in the hills. Yes, they overthrew this feudal system, but it's replaced now by speculators and banks. And you can still hear the homeless families asking of all the landed gentry in our ranks, who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right?
I would like to thank you so much for coming, and thanks so much to Linda for putting this together, and thanks so much to Todd for the 3-camera shoot, and that's like film professional language for shooting with 3 cameras. I've learned all kinds of fancy terminology hanging out with artists. Another fancy thing I learned is pedagogy. So I was in Europe for years and years hearing people talk about pedagogy before I ever figured out what it was. And I'm still not entirely sure, but when you go to places like Denmark, half the people you meet are pedagogues. You know, you ask somebody, what do you do for a living? They say, I'm a pedagogue. And it's just amazing that you can have such a prosperous society where half the people do something and you don't know what they're doing, you know? And it's always like, I never know where to take the conversation at that point because, you know, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. So, and then to make matters more confusing, they're usually doing one of any number of different things. It doesn't seem to have any consistency to it, you know. But I suppose that's true of most professions that you don't understand. They must seem complicated unless you're doing it, you know. But I wrote this song, and then a Danish pedagogue told me that this song is in fact pedagogical in nature. So I was very happy to be participating in this pedagogy. And it's sort of my theory of what makes social movements happen in 3 minutes. You know, you can read books on the subject too, but you can start by listening to this song. It's shorter. You know. And if you know anybody in Olympia, I'm playing at Media Island tomorrow night before I head back home to Portland. And yeah, and there's CDs over there. which I told you before, but there's your second commercial announcement for the evening. And there's some of you here who are already subscribers and others who aren't, but if you are one of these gainfully employed types and you want to become a subscriber, then this is something I encourage, because it's my new method for making a living at this, which is, because basically, you get your stuff played on Spotify and you get 1 cent for every 100 plays or something. So it takes a while before you actually ever recoup your expenses for recording and stuff like that. Actually, you don't. And so the new method that some of us are trying is getting people to basically send us $50 a year. In exchange, you get CDs and free downloads and free access to shows and stuff. But it's still a better deal for me than it is for you, which is the point, so. And you can read about that at davidrovics.com. So click the subscribe button or take a card. Problem. That part isn't hard. The second step is everybody realizing they're like you. They're holding the same card. Step 3 is finding there's a tactic when everyone believes it could be true. That if all the people work collectively, there just might be something we can do, and everything can change. So quick. Businessmen and congressmen and TV sets will try hard to make sure it isn't so. You don't have a problem, and if you do, it's not the same problem. And if it is, well, there's just nowhere you can go. But it's happened many times. The history is rich, though we easily forget how a meme can take hold and grab you, how it can spread out like a net, and everything can change. So cool. They'll say we are lost, or we're dreaming, or they'll make a dream for us. They'll try to come up with a good story about why we belong at the back of the bus, about why we belong in this position, about how we don't know what we meant, about how there most certainly isn't any such thing as the 99%, but everything can change. So quick. Everything can change. So thank you.